Flight attendant kicks black teen off first class. Then the airline lost $4 billion overnight. At 16, she was black and seated quietly in first class when a security guard seized her arm, forcefully pulling her from her seat, declaring, "This isn't your kind of seat." The other passengers remained passive, some even recording the incident, while one woman smirked and muttered about how they always tried to infiltrate spaces where they didn't belong. The girl didn't scream or plead. She simply stood up, smoothed the wrinkles from her coat, and exited the plane as if her dignity hadn't just been stripped away in front of 30 silent onlookers. No one knew her name. No one cared. They questioned her presence, believing she didn't fit in with the crowd. But what if the girl they belittled possessed the ability to dismantle their entire reality? This narrative transcends a mere seat. It explores the consequences of underestimating those who wield unseen influence. Think you understand the direction of this tale? Think again. If you feel stories like this deserve attention, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments about where you're tuning in from and how you would have reacted in her situation. Witness that moment as it unfolded. Let's discuss justice and truth. The terminal hummed with the familiar early morning activity. Boarding announcements resonating above, flight crews navigating through security, and passengers gathering around charging stations, clutching half-finished coffee and battling sleep. Gate C-24, designated for Flight 227 to Los Angeles, was already bustling. But in the first-class boarding lane stood a girl who defied the typical expectations, at least to those accustomed to a specific image. She was 16, black, and dressed in a pristine navy sweater tucked into high-waisted cream trousers, her posture impeccable and her expression composed. Her name was Amara Wilson, and she held a first-class ticket in her left hand and a passport in her right. She hadn't engaged with anyone, nor had she caused a stir. She simply waited her turn like everyone else in line. Yet the subtle glances, whispered comments, and assumptions persisted. A man in a tailored gray suit leaned toward his wife and murmured, "She must be a minor traveling on someone else's pass." The wife remained silent, but her eyes narrowed as they both moved forward. When it was finally Zara's turn to scan her boarding pass, the gate agent hesitated, forcing a smile that felt more strained than genuine. "Welcome aboard," she said, her tone laced with skepticism rather than warmth. The scanner beeped green, yet the doubt lingered on the woman's face. Zara thanked her, passed through the gate, and walked the jet bridge alone. Inside the aircraft, the first-class cabin radiated luxury, featuring polished walnut accents, soft gold lighting, and a serene hush. Zara settled into seat 2A by the window, neatly stowing her carry-on before crossing her legs at the ankle, just as her grandmother had shown her. She took out her phone, quickly typed a message to her father that read, "Thank you for the seat, love you," and set it face down on the tray. The man across the aisle observed her for a few moments before returning to his tablet. A woman behind Zara didn't bother to look away as she leaned over to whisper something to her seatmate. Zara didn't need to hear it. She already knew. She adjusted the hem of her sweater and gazed out the window at the tarmac, where murmurs began as the final boarding announcement echoed. A man in 4C called over a flight attendant, discreetly gesturing towards Zara. "That's her seat," he remarked. "Is she really supposed to be there?" The flight attendant consulted her tablet. "Yes, sir. Seat 2A is confirmed. But is she old enough to fly alone in first class?" "Yes, sir," the attendant reiterated, her patience waning slightly. He nodded tightly but remained silent. 5 minutes later, just as the flight crew was securing the main cabin doors, a TSA officer stepped on board. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a firm jaw and eyes that scrutinized with purpose. His badge read, "Derek Malone." He paused at the cabin entrance, quickly scanning the rows before making his way directly to Zara. Passengers turned to watch him as he approached her seat and said, "Miss, I need to see your boarding pass." Zara blinked once. "Is something wrong?" she inquired. "I just need to confirm your seat," he replied firmly. She reached into the seat pocket, retrieved her ticket, and handed it over without hesitation. He examined it, then looked back at her. "This is for first class." "Yes," she responded calmly. "That's where I'm seated." Derek Malone narrowed his eyes. "Please step into the aisle. "May I ask why?" she said. "We've received a report of a boarding discrepancy." "There's no mistake," she responded. "That seat was reserved in my name." "Please get out of the seat," he insisted, his voice rising. A few phones began to come out, and someone started recording. Zara stood up slowly as Derek Malone yanked her carry-on from under the seat without any regard. The zipper caught, causing her journal to fall onto the carpet. He didn't bother to pick it up. Instead, he turned toward the front of the cabin and motioned for her to exit. "We'll sort this out off the plane." "Sort it out," she replied, her tone still calm and composed. "I have a valid boarding pass and a seat. Assignment." He remained silent as he followed her, and no one intervened. Not the woman who had whispered, nor the man who had questioned her presence, nor even the attendant who had verified her seat. One passenger chuckled quietly and remarked, "She probably found it in the trash." Another added, "They always try to game the system." On the jet bridge, a second agent awaited in silence as she was escorted past the gate, through the expansive windows, and toward a row of metal chairs against the wall. "Sit here," Derek Malone instructed, dropping her bag at her feet. "We're checking on the ticket status." "You already saw it," she replied, but he disregarded her. A fellow passenger strolled by, casting a glance her way before continuing on. A teenage boy, filming with his phone, whispered, "Yo, what did she do?" No one responded. She remained still, the cold metal pressing against her clothes, not moving or shedding a tear. Her phone buzzed with a message. From her father. "Have you taken off yet?" "I'm tracking the flight." She gazed at the screen and slowly replied, "Not yet. They removed me from the plane, but I don't know why." Three dots appeared, then paused. Suddenly her phone rang, but she chose not to answer. With a clipped tone and sharp instructions, he commanded the bewildered crew while Zara stood silently, observing their expressions shift from smug confidence to a mix of shame and confusion. The security officer, who had insisted she disembark now, appeared as if he had swallowed something unpleasant. With a mouthful of glass and his clipboard clutched like a shield, he attempted to mumble an excuse, but Jonathan Carter silenced him with a piercing look. "You removed a confirmed first-class passenger based on instinct," he stated, his voice elevating just enough to draw the attention of nearby travelers. "Or perhaps it wasn't instinct, but merely an assumption." Zara maintained her composure, though the tension in her jaw and the way her hands were folded in front of her revealed the adrenaline coursing through her. She had done nothing wrong, yet her mere presence had ignited the storm. Jonathan Carter tapped swiftly on his tablet, retrieving Zara's manifest ticket verification and Nordsky's internal priority registry. Everything aligned. She was indeed in C2A, with a full fare booked weeks in advance and priority clearance from corporate. There was no mistake, only bias. "You claim she wasn't on the." Jonathan Carter turned to the lead gate agent, a blonde woman named Lauren Hayes who wore a nervous smile. Stammering, she suggested it might have been an outdated system version, or perhaps the sync hadn't completed. Jonathan Carter interrupted her, saying, "Just stop talking." He glanced over his shoulder and signaled to another staff member to find out who had authorized the reassignment of her seat. Just as the team began to scramble, a low mutter pierced the tension, sharp enough to cut glass and loud enough to be picked up by a nearby smartphone's recording. "It's hard to believe a black kid could just purchase a seat like that." The voice belonged to Ronald Baxter, an older flight coordinator who stood behind the gate desk with his arms crossed, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the microphone clipped to his collar had caught every word. A collective gasp echoed through the area, and several heads turned. A bystander near Zara, who had been recording since the security officer first approached her, zoomed in to capture the unapologetic, casual expression on Paul's face, as if he had merely stated a fact, expressed a blatant truth. His tone lacked hostility, instead filled with conviction. A conviction that her being in first class was a mistake due to her skin. Zara's eyes darted to him, piercing and fierce. She remained silent, but the intensity of her gaze forced him to squirm. Jonathan Carter halted, gradually pivoting to Paul. "What did you just say?" Paul blinked. "I voiced what everyone else was already thinking." "No," Jonathan Carter replied, his voice calm and measured. "You just articulated precisely what this entire airline will come to regret." He turned to the camera still recording in the bystander's hand and nodded once. "Keep that footage. We'll need it." Before anyone could respond, two uniformed police officers arrived at the gate, having responded to a passenger escalation report logged 10 minutes earlier. One officer, tall and broad, quickly scanned the scene and approached Zara. "Are you Miss Bennett?" he inquired. Zara hesitated, but Ben nodded. "Yes, I need to ask you to step away from the VIP zone remains in place until we resolve this matter." His tone was steady yet assertive as Jonathan Carter positioned himself between them. "She's not the issue, she's the victim." The officer responded, "Until we clarify the incident, she must leave this area." "Her father owns the airline," Jonathan Carter stated plainly, "and she has done nothing wrong." The officer's partner, a woman with a more composed demeanor, glanced at Zara's boarding pass and Jonathan Carter's corporate badge, her posture subtly shifting. "I believe we should consult our supervisor before proceeding any further." The male officer continued, insisting there was an issue despite Jonathan Carter's protest. "You're claiming this girl had a valid ticket, yet there's still a problem?" Jonathan Carter replied through gritted teeth, "There's no problem. Just a lawsuit looming." Behind them, whispers began to circulate among the passengers, who had previously remained quiet while Zara was escorted off the plane. A businessman leaned toward his wife and quietly remarked, "If that were my daughter," while another traveler pulled out their phone to start texting. The rising volume of screams now nearly drowned out the murmurs. The conversation resumed on the plane as the man in Zara's seat became aware of the change. He stood up, walked down the aisle, and leaned into the galley. "What's happening?" he asked a flight attendant. "You told me that seat was unassigned." The attendant, visibly flustered, whispered back, "There's a situation." "Am I going to be asked to move? Should I get my things?" he pressed. The attendant remained silent, and in that moment, uncertainty spread like wildfire. Power dynamics were shifting outside the aircraft, while Zara stayed put, now flanked by others. Both police officers, Jonathan Carter and three members of Nordsky's executive response team, had come from the upper-level offices. One of them, a woman named Patricia Vaughn, scrutinized Zara before addressing Jonathan Carter. "We need to keep this out of the public eye." Jonathan Carter, his eyes flashing, replied, "If you want to de-escalate, you should ensure this never happens again." Joanne's voice lowered as she pointed toward the crowd at the terminal windows, where more people had gathered. Phones raised for a live stream. A banner scrolled across one screen, and the phrase "North Sky Discrimination" began to trend. Jonathan Carter's expression hardened. "Good. Let the world watch." Zara's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from her father. "I'm in the boardroom. Do not move. We're initiating corporate protocol in 5 minutes. Stay calm." She locked her screen, lifted her head, and looked back at the officer. "Am I free to return to my seat now?" The female officer glanced at her partner. "We have no grounds to hold her." The man didn't respond, his jaw flexing as he stepped back, reluctantly nodding at Zara. She turned to Jonathan Carter and asked, "Should I reboard?" "Not yet," he replied. "They're cleaning a seat." She raised an eyebrow at the mention of cleaning, recalling the man who had spilled coffee on the cushion. As she made her way back down the jet bridge, she was escorted by a Norsky executive, followed closely by the same security officer who had forcibly removed her earlier. The atmosphere was thick with something more profound than mere judgment. It was a denial so entrenched, so woven into the fabric of the system, that even as they attempted to rectify their mistakes, no one could acknowledge that they had occurred. When Zara stepped into the first-class cabin, once more conversations halted abruptly. Phones remained in hand, while some passengers averted their gaze and others remained indifferent. She made her way back to seat 2A, now tidy and freshly fluffed, as if the warmth of hospitality could somehow wash away her embarrassment. However, just as she was about to settle in, the same security officer, Officer Derek Malone, reached past her and seized her tote bag. "Is this yours?" he inquired, already pulling it off the armrest. Zara nodded slowly. "Yes, it was beneath the seat." "What's the reason?" Before she could complete her sentence, he let the bag drop to the floor in the aisle. "Take it with you next time you try to sneak into the wrong section," he muttered, his voice low but filled with venom. She looked at the bag now lying sideways, the zipper half open, its contents spilling out, a tube of lip balm, a few pens, her boarding pass. She didn't bend down to retrieve it right away. Turning to him, her voice was even yet sharp. I didn't sneak into anything. I boarded with a scanned ticket like everyone else. Derek Malone smirked. Sure you did. And then he walked away. Boots thudding against the carpet, the sound more substantial than any unspoken apology. Zara bent down, collected her belongings in silence, and eventually settled into her seat across the aisle. A woman cleared her throat, whispering to her husband. Some people need to learn their place, her tone too loud to be unintentional. He chuckled in response. Should have just sent her to the back and spared us all the drama. Another passenger, a man in his 40s with thinning blonde hair dressed in business casual, leaned across the aisle with a smirk. Honestly, I've flown with this airline for years, and I've never seen first class get this diverse. He delivered the last word as if it were a punchline rather than a description. Zara heard him. She caught every word, but she remained silent for the moment. Instead, she retrieved her tablet, opened the encrypted documents her father had provided for emergencies, and began typing a brief email titled, Formal Record, Flight 227 Incident. Her fingers moved with intention, devoid of emotion, as feelings would complicate matters, and complications were unwelcome. She sought a precise and unambiguous corporate reckoning. As the plane readied for takeoff, a new flight attendant, unfamiliar with the earlier events, approached to offer her a drink. He hesitated upon seeing her name on the manifest, quickly straightening his posture. Miss Bennett, can I get you anything? She looked up, her expression serene yet inscrutable. No, just ensure your colleagues are aware of who is truly in charge. The attendant blinked, nodded, and stepped back behind him. The older man, who had previously laughed about diversity, rolled his eyes and muttered, Entitled brat. Zara didn't turn, but her jaw tightened as she pressed send on her report. 15 rows back in economy, a teenage girl with braided hair scrolled through her phone and paused at a live stream that had just begun trending. Number Zara Bennett. The video depicted a young black girl being escorted from first class, surrounded by staff, while passengers looked on in silence. The caption read, The CEO's daughter has taken charge of her own airline flight. The girl gasped. Mom, she whispered, you have to see this. Up front in the cockpit, the captain received a call from corporate flight 227. Do not engage the autopilot until we confirm clearance protocol. The CEO's daughter's on board, and we've encountered complications. The captain glanced at his co-pilot, shrugged, and remarked, Looks like today is going to be a long one. In first class, Zara accessed her father's live tracking dashboard. She could view the passenger manifest in the internal crew logs, noticing the name Derek Malone J. highlighted in red. Her father hadn't merely taken control, he had already initiated the sweep. Zara no longer needed to respond verbally. The data was speaking for her. Yet even as this silent, unseen retaliation took place, the personal attack continued. 15 minutes into the flight, while the plane soared over Pennsylvania, a flight attendant delivered an apology card to her from the captain's note, handwritten and accompanied by a gift voucher. Expressed, We regret the misunderstanding and are honored to have you aboard. Zara gazed at the card before carefully folding it closed. While regret came easily, respect was a different matter. Across the aisle, the woman who had ridiculed her leaned in once more, feigning curiosity as she asked, So what's it like being the token success story? Zara turned her head, her voice steady as she replied, I don't need to be your narrative, and I'm not here to soothe your discomfort. The woman blinked in surprise while her husband shifted uncomfortably. It was an uncomfortable situation, yet Zara had already turned her attention back to her screen. The stares had not silenced the whispers, and the distinction that other passengers enjoyed did not apply to her. She felt anything but invisible. Instead, she was like a source of radiation. Every movement she made, every glance she exchanged, seemed to provoke a reaction, be it a flinch, a whisper, or a turned-away gaze. She was no longer just a passenger. She had become a disruption. About an hour into the flight, just as the attendant started handing out pre-ordered meals, one of another figure approached Zara. This time not the young man who had previously offered her water, but a woman in her mid-40s with defined features, flawless lipstick, and eyes that seemed to assess people like objects on display. Her name tag read Red C. Lambert. Leaning in with a strained smile and a clipped tone, she began, "Miss Bennett, I've been instructed to ask you to accompany me to the forward galley. There's been a discrepancy regarding the passenger report that corporate wishes to clarify." Zara hesitated, taking a moment to analyze the woman's expression, searching for clues. There was a tension behind the smile, and she sensed the deception in the word clarify. "Am I being asked or ordered?" she inquired with a composed demeanor. Lambert's lips barely shifted, yet her voice lowered a notch. "It would be advisable for you to cooperate. Otherwise, we will need to notify airport security upon landing." As Zara surveyed the cabin, she noticed every gaze, some discreet, others overt, focused on this unfolding situation. Gathering her tablet, she followed Lambert to the galley door near the cockpit. The door opened, and Zara stepped inside as it closed behind her. What she stepped into was not the galley, but a makeshift holding area converted from the crew rest space. It was dimly lit and secured by a soft, clicking, magnetic lock, carrying a faint scent of cleaning agents and steel. A collapsible seat lined one wall, and there were no windows, no outlets, and no view of the cabin. Lambert did not follow her inside. The door closed behind Zara like a vault. For several minutes, silence reigned, until the intercom crackled to life. "For security reasons, we need you to remain here while we verify some inconsistencies with your boarding." The voice on the line provided no name, lacking any hint of apology. It felt rehearsed, cold, and dismissive. Zara took a seat, her posture impeccably straight, determined not to let her body reflect the insult. She glanced at her phone. No signal, airplane mode, no Wi-Fi. She pressed the crew call button once, but received no reply. She pressed it again, then a third time, met only with silence. 10 minutes passed, then 15. At last the door creaked open, just enough for Lambert to slip in, clipboard and cup of water in hand. She didn't offer any explanation. "We're still working to confirm," he said. "Your status," she stated without emotion, "you will stay here until we arrive in Los Angeles, where someone from airport control will assist you further." "Am I being suspected of something?" Zara inquired. "Because this feels very much like detainment." Lambert shrugged. "You're not under arrest, but you are prohibited from interacting with the rest of the cabin until we can verify your intentions for this flight." Zara's brow knitted in confusion over the word intentions. Lambert remained silent, already turning away, but just before the door shut, she hesitated. She remarked, her tone dripping with condescension, that perhaps it would be wiser for you to fly with your parents next time, as first class might be too sophisticated for unaccompanied minors with a sense of entitlement. Then she locked the door once more. Zara let out a slow breath, her hand instinctively reaching for her pocket, only to find her phone still useless. She surveyed the room again. No cameras, no windows, no ventilation fan. Just a sense of isolation and the passage of time, which she understood could be a dangerous weapon in the wrong hands. She leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. She glanced at her eyes for a fleeting moment and recalled her father's words from when she was 8. "If anyone ever makes you feel insignificant, remember your true self and remind them." She would, but not in this place, not confined in a lockbox back at the cabin. Passengers noticed her missing presence. Some speculated she had gone to the restroom, while others murmured that she had been discreetly taken away. A man in seat 3A grumbled, "Well, that took long enough." His companion responded, "I honestly thought she was about to kick off her own live stream revolution." In the economic sphere, the girl who initially spotted the trending hashtag observed the absence of updates and commented beneath the original video, "Does anyone know if she's all right?" With no post for 45 minutes, her comment sparked a wave of responses and messages flooded into Inskee's official account. The pressure outside the plane was intensifying, yet inside, Zara remained isolated from it all. Lambert returned once more, 40 minutes later, this time carrying a tablet and accompanied by another person. A uniformed crew member, who remained silent, Inform Zara that she would be the first to be escorted off the aircraft upon landing. Do not re-enter the cabin, keep your hands visible, and do not speak to other passengers. Wait for airport authorities to meet you at the door. You still haven't told me what I'm accused of, Zara replied. Lambert offered a tight smile, saying, We're not accusing, we're observing. Zara's hands clenched into fists at her sides. I recommend you inform your supervisors that if I'm not permitted to speak with my father within 5 minutes of landing, you will require a lawyer before you need a manager. Lambert opened her mouth but then paused. You'll be contacted shortly. The door closed again, and the last hour of the flight unfolded in unsettling silence. Zara didn't cry. She didn't panic. Instead, she sat, breathed, and strategized. If they believed that isolating her would instill humility, they were mistaken. It was only sharpening her focus. She meticulously reviewed every moment, every voice, every detail. She started to mentally compose the statement she would deliver, not to the media or a manager, but directly to the board of directors, ensuring that each one of them would read it. She sensed the descent, not only in a physical sense, but also psychologically. This was a pivotal moment. She was no longer disembarking the plane as a passenger. She was stepping off as an issue to be managed, silenced, and eliminated. The individuals awaiting her on the other side of the jet bridge were already gearing up to do just that. As the plane came to a stop and the door opened with a hiss, a female ground agent entered and called out for Zara with a formal tone. Miss Bennett, please come with us. Zara remained silent as she walked past the cockpit, ignoring the smirking flight attendant who avoided her gaze. She also passed the same officer who had earlier tossed her bag, now standing with his arms crossed, seemingly challenging her to say something. Keeping her head held high, she approached a small group of Norski airport staff waiting on the jet bridge, all dressed in suits that appeared more like dressed in armor rather than uniforms. A man stepped forward. He was bald, clean-shaven, in his early 50s, and wore a clip badge identifying him as Edward Pierce, the senior terminal manager at Red Sea Roads. He extended his hand, but she did not take it. Miss Bennett, my name is Edward Pierce, he began. We sincerely apologize for the confusion during your flight. We'd like to resolve this quickly and professionally. She remained unresponsive, showing no reaction. If you'll follow us, he continued, gesturing toward a side hallway, we have a quiet area where we can talk away from the public eye. He added, Public? I like it was a disease. Zara walked down a narrow corridor, accompanied by 2 staff members, towards a small, sterile room at the end. Inside, there was a table, 2 chairs, and a mounted camera. One of the women quickly stepped forward to disable the camera before Zara entered. She remained silent as she took a seat. Across from her, Rode pulled out a slim file. So here's what we're trying to do, he said, his tone shifting to the forced warmth of someone attempting to handle a scandal with a smile. There has been some misunderstanding regarding your flight and certain irregularities with the boarding system. We suspect that an internal software issue flagged your name, resulting in a series of responses that contributed to the unfortunate experience you faced. Zara raised an eyebrow at the mention of a series of discriminatory actions. Rhodes chose to overlook that and continued, sliding a printed document across the table. What we propose is to categorize this as an internal error, with no blame placed on any individual, merely a procedural glitch. If you consent, we will proceed accordingly. Offer immediate compensation, priority travel upgrades for a year, and a formal letter of apology signed by the regional VP. Zara didn't even acknowledge the document. So you expect me to act as if this incident never occurred? Rhodes exhaled slowly. We're asking you to assist us in preventing escalation. Once this becomes public, it spirals out of control. People will distort it, weaponize it, and you'll be portrayed as angry, difficult, and privileged, regardless of your age. That's not the image you want. I'm not concerned about image, Zara replied, her voice unwavering. I'm focused on the precedent. Rhodes leaned in, presenting an escape route. Zara smiled, but it was a smile that could make even the most confident men reconsider their stance. I don't need an escape. I need a path forward. She stood, slid the unsigned document back across the table, and declared, My legal team will be in touch. Rhodes paused, then quickly glanced at a staff member by the door. She gave a discreet nod and exited. Less than a minute later, in a secure server room 3 floors above, a junior technician named Kevin Lynn received an urgent instruction via Slack from the senior supervisor, ordered the deletion of all footage from Gate C18 in Jeep D, specifically from the timestamps 9:05 to 10:20, labeling it as a corrupted file recovery. Bradley hesitated, aware that such orders were unusual, but the message bore a red flag indicating confidential VP approval. This meant the cover-up had been authorized from the highest levels. He completed the deletion in under 3 minutes, encrypting the process to safeguard against future audits. However, what he was unaware of, and what no one knew, was that Zara's father had foreseen this very action. Marcus Ellison had put a redundancy plan in place. Protocol established 3 years prior dictated that any incident involving his family members on Nordsky properties would initiate a remote sync to an external legal archive in Geneva. This sync commenced the instant Zara's boarding pass was scanned, capturing every second of video, every line of system metadata, and every overheard racial slur, all securely saved off-site and protected from deletion. In the holding room, Zara stood by the window with her arms crossed, observing a fleet of luggage carts winding their way across the tarmac, feeling slightly more flustered than before. I was previously informed that the footage we typically rely on to review the incident has been lost due to a system failure, he stated cautiously. Zara remained still. How convenient, he continued. We will carry out a thorough internal investigation, but without visual evidence, it will be challenging to determine responsibility. You don't require video, she replied. You had witnesses, crew members, passengers, the man in 1C who laughed when they removed me, the woman in 3D who recorded the entire incident. The whole cabin heard the flight attendant say I didn't belong, Miss Bennett remarked. With her hands clasped, Nordsky regarded these claims with utmost seriousness. You're not taking it seriously, she remarked, brushing past him toward the door. You're taking it personally, and that's the issue. Where are you going? He inquired. Home, she replied, opening the door to speak with someone who could manage this situation appropriately. As the SUV departed from the terminal and merged onto the freeway, Zara sat quietly in the back seat, her face lit by the glow of her phone screen, inundated with a stream of messages, texts from friends, DMs from strangers, and emails from reporters, and tagged videos were already making the rounds on every major platform. The footage from the plane, including the moment Officer Derek Malone discarded her bag and the flight attendant scoffed at her boarding pass, had gone viral within an hour of landing. However, with each refresh, Zara observed something unusual. Reposted clips vanished within minutes, hashtags went silent, comment sections were disabled, and entire accounts that had shared the footage were abruptly flagged for content violations or marked for legal review. Initially, she believed it was mere coincidence, but when her father's legal team sent her a screenshot of a cease and desist order filed by Nordsky's internal counsel, signed and timestamped less than 20 minutes after their arrival, she realized the airline was not merely attempting to rectify the situation, they were actively working to eliminate the evidence. Their goal was not to be correct, but to endure the public outcry. At that very moment, within Nordsky's West Coast Security Division office, the individual spearheading the internal response lounged with his feet propped up on the table, arms crossed behind his head. A self-satisfied grin spread across his face. His name was Gregory Holt, a former federal agent now serving as the head of global security operations for Ensky. He had been brought in to tidy up the mess, as the CEO had instructed, to manage scandals before they hit the headlines. To Malcolm, the Amara Wilson situation was merely a minor issue that would blow over by morning. Let the internet cry, he dismissed, brushing aside the junior analyst who attempted to express concern about the growing traction of the hashtag. That little girl doesn't intimidate anyone with a badge. Believe me, just wait 24 hours and people will shift their focus to the next scandal. The analyst paused, then spoke softly. Sir, we've seen over 180,000 reposts in just 6 hours. Referring to her father, Bennett remarked, He's not merely wealthy, he's overwhelmingly uninterested. Malcolm scoffed. Do you really think I'm intimidated by money? Many of these billionaires conceal themselves behind legal teams and disappear when things get tough. He straightened his tie and moved to the window that faced the runway. I've witnessed this scenario before. She'll portray herself as the victim and might even secure an interview with someone. Puff Piece Outlet will release a revised apology stating, by next quarter, no one will even recall her existence. He wore a smug expression, asserting, you know what people remember? Results. We're here to bury problems, not to apologize for them. Meanwhile, in a private boardroom with a view of downtown Los Angeles, Marcus Ellison faced a room full of executives, each face drained of color from the weight of Zara's full statement, which had just been read aloud verbatim. The incident was supported by time-stamped metadata, corroborated passenger testimonies, and encrypted video files that detailed the events on board and documented internal communications among crew members in the aftermath. One particular clip left the room in stunned silence. It featured audio from a crew radio where Malcolm could be heard laughing, saying, she thinks she's untouchable because her daddy owns a few planes. She's still just a kid in a seat she didn't earn. He chuckled once more, saying, no one will take her seriously. The room fell silent until Victor finally interjected, you're all about to take her seriously. Legal officers exchanged shocked looks across the table. The head of HR dabbed his forehead with a napkin, and the VP of PR appeared as if she might be sick. We need to get ahead of this, someone murmured. No, Victor replied, you're already behind. With that, he exited. Back at Nordsky's headquarters, Malcolm was savoring a scotch in his corner office when his phone buzzed with a direct call from the chairman of the board. He allowed it to ring twice before answering nonchalantly. We're here. The voice on the other end was cold. Turn on channel 4. Irritated, Malcolm grabbed the remote and switched on the wall-mounted screen. What he saw drained the color from his face. It wasn't just Zara's story trending. It had become the story. Breaking news banners scrolled across CNN, MSNBC, and international networks. News headlines reported Airline CEO's daughter involved in first-class incident, Nordsky under federal investigation for racial discrimination. The most troubling revelation was the evidence of a pervasive culture of profiling within the flight crews. The segment featured a leaked internal email exchange where several employees, including Malcolm, deliberated on strategies for escalation, containment, and managing optics in racially sensitive situations. One striking line in bold stated, keep any minority VIPs quiet until we confirm their legitimacy. Appearances can be misleading. Deceptive Malcolm's name appeared in the footer of every message. The chairman's voice came back. Pack your things, you're finished. Malcolm stood still, his glass trembling in his hand. You can't be serious, he protested. You're right, the chairman responded. Victor is. Then he ended the call. On social media, the hashtag Czargate was trending, with tens of thousands of users inundating Nordsky's pages. Prominent figures, celebrities, politicians, and activists had joined the outcry for transparency, reparations, and resignations. Zara had remained completely silent. The silence enveloping her only intensified the chaos surrounding her. As the digital realm exploded in fury and Nordsky's PR team fought to control a wildfire that showed no signs of extinguishing, Zara found herself in her father's private study, wrapped in quietude. The gravity of the past 24 hours had yet to fully weigh on her, not due to indifference, but because she was far from finished. The truth was just beginning to emerge, and while the world struggled to grasp the enormity of the situation, she was already 10 steps ahead, her phone in hand. Buzzed with a new alert, this time from a reliable source within Nordsky's scheduling division. It stated, inbound flights frozen, maintenance code G7 issued to the entire fleet, delays expected within the next hour, no public explanation released. Zara focused on the single line, but it carried immense significance. Her father had acted, and when Marcus Ellison took action, the entire landscape changed. Precisely 62 minutes after she departed the terminal, a nationwide system flag was activated through the company's proprietary flight control algorithm, which was coded with a non-negotiable override from the ownership tier, mandated that every domestic and international flight operated by Nordsky, involving over 280 aircraft, be grounded immediately under the pretext of a technical recalibration review. The true reason, however, never reached public memos. Yet in boardrooms, private Slack threads, and encrypted email chains throughout the airline's hierarchy, the reality was clear. Marcus Ellison had silently pulled the lever on an empire, and he did so without uttering a word on camera, as every major news channel reported simultaneously. Interrupted their planned coverage with a striking red banner announcing the airline ownership linked to a viral discrimination scandal, revealing that the CEO's daughter was a passenger involved in the incident. A formal statement from the FAA quickly followed, confirming that although no technical threats had been detected, the airline's internal systems were under emergency review at the owner's request. The public was bewildered, the media was insatiable, and within corporate circles, one unsettling truth loomed like the chill of winter. The girl they had attempted to silence. She didn't merely belong in first class, she possessed the authority to dismantle it entirely. Within Nordsky's global headquarters, turmoil erupted as executives rushed to prepare press releases, only to have them halted by legal counsel, who recommended refraining from any statements until the board convened. However, that board meeting was now presided over not by the acting CEO, but by Marcus Ellison himself, who had activated an emergency clause in the company's operating charter, granting him the power to supersede executive authority if the brand's reputation was at stake. In the meeting room, Victor stood resolutely at the head of the table, while the directors and officers squirmed under his unwavering gaze. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice a blend of cold steel and smooth silk, "I built this airline on trust, dignity, and performance. In the past 24 hours, all three have been compromised, not merely by rogue employees, but by the culture you have allowed to thrive under your leadership." He gestured toward a screen showcasing time-stamped footage of Zara being escorted off the plane. "This is your legacy now, and we will erase it. Craft a new statement." Facing him, the CFO attempted to address Mr. Bennett. "The financial repercussions of grounding our entire fleet are devastating. We're looking at losses in the hundreds of millions daily." Victor interjected firmly. "Those losses are easier to recover from than our integrity. I would prefer to see this company lose cash than compromise its credibility." He then directed his chief legal officer, "Initiate immediate terminations for everyone involved in this failure. Derek Malone, Lambert, Withers, Ree, every single one of them. No severance, no NDAs. I demand transparency." The legal officer nodded, already typing away, ensuring that our systems audit every past instance of escalated passenger incidents from the last 5 years. If we uncover any patterns, we will come forward before they are revealed. Meanwhile, Zara was seated across town in a soundproof studio, not for an interview, but for a live stream directed not at reporters, but at the public. Uncut, unscripted, and live. With a single click, the video commenced broadcasting across every major platform, embedded on news sites, reshared by influencers, and translated into 6 languages. In the first half hour, she spoke not as a victim, nor did she rant. She conveyed the truth. "I wasn't dragged off a plane due to an error," she stated, her voice steady and unwavering. "I was removed because someone looked at me and decided I didn't belong, and then a system designed to protect them attempted to conceal it. But I do belong. Not just because my father owns this airline, but because no one, regardless of appearance, should have to prove their worthiness of respect." Her gaze remained firm, her voice resolute as she concluded. At 42:54, the stream conveyed that this situation transcended mere seating. It was fundamentally about a principle. Her words resonated through headlines, timelines, and primetime segments. Rather than panic, her family responded with preparation. Marcus Ellison, seasoned in crisis management and empire building, faced the internal collapse head-on. He didn't rely on PR teams for statements or shield himself with legal defenses. At exactly 6 p.m., he was ready to confront the challenge. At 43 minutes and 27 seconds past the hour in Eastern Time, he entered the studio of a prominent national network, dressed in a black suit with the Nordsky insignia shining on his lapel. Not as a mark of ownership, but as a caution. When the anchor inquired if he was ready to publicly discuss the incident, he remained unfazed. "I'm not here to address it," Victor stated, his tone steady and measured. "I'm here to put an end to it." The camera gradually zoomed in as he spoke, asserting that no one could harm his daughter and simply walk away as if nothing had occurred. This issue extends beyond her. It encompasses every individual who has taken their rightful place only to be told they do not belong. It highlights an industry that prioritizes image over responsibility, and that changes now. His statement may not have been refined or practiced, but it was sincere and ignited a passion that no corporate setting could dampen. Within moments of its broadcast, the Justice Department issued a joint bulletin with the FAA. The Department of Transportation has announced a formal investigation into North Airlines and its affiliated subsidiaries, responding to persistent complaints regarding discriminatory practices, passenger profiling, and the alteration of internal documentation to conceal reports. Concurrently, an anonymous whistleblower has disclosed more than 2,000 internal HR reports, many marked as closed with no action taken, despite evident allegations of racial targeting, false accusations, and wrongful terminations. The documents date back over a decade and have been authenticated by several independent legal auditors, revealed a troubling scenario where Nordsky had cultivated a culture of systemic suppression. Internal investigations were frequently conducted by the same departments facing allegations of misconduct. Media outlets, both digital and traditional, were inundated with headlines as stories emerged. Former flight attendants who had raised concerns found themselves reassigned to punitive routes, while passenger complaints were obscured under manual review statuses. Security reports were altered to deflect blame. Black or brown travelers, despite the evidence, Victor did not shy away from the situation. Instead, he confronted it head-on during an emergency press conference at the North Ski campus, flanked by executives, lawyers, and federal observers. He addressed the swelling crowd with a determination that surprised even his supporters. Effective immediately, he declared, an independent ethics panel will conduct an audit of every department within this airline, beginning with the Office of Passenger Relations and Security Enforcement. No badge, no title, and no tenure will provide protection. Anyone from the truth, he glanced to his right, where Zara remained quiet yet resolute. This situation transcends mere appearances. It is fundamentally about justice. Meanwhile, within the company's digital forensics department, a group of analysts commenced the process of decrypting server logs that had previously been deemed inaccessible. What they uncovered was even more alarming than the leaked document had indicated. Suppression filters designed to identify and redirect any complaints containing terms such as profiling, racial bias, or security abuse away from legal scrutiny and into a general inquiry folder. That never prompted escalation. Even more concerning, internal communications among mid-tier managers disclosed unofficial quotas and pressure to scrutinize non-traditional travelers more rigorously in premium cabins, all under the guise of security consistency. Zara, now positioned as a direct advisor to the ethics panel, meticulously reviewed every file they opened. She maintained a composed demeanor, devoid of outrage or emotion, as she examined the names, dates, and patterns, taking detailed notes. When the Department of Justice arrived to commence interviews, she attended every session, not as a symbol for every passenger who has ever felt out of place. She was asked why she wasn't taking a break or stepping back. Her response was unequivocal. She was born into this system and would not depart until she had reconstructed it. As the investigation progressed, numerous resignations poured in from former department heads who recognized the inevitable outcome. However, not everyone was permitted to exit gracefully. A senior VP of security was held accountable for approving unlawful data deletions, including the directive. At 47:45, the individual responsible for deleting the video of Zara's removal was arrested and charged with obstruction of justice. Another executive who had approved non-disclosure agreements to silence wrongfully terminated employees was implicated in a class action civil lawsuit seeking over $300 million in damages. Public support for Zara in the pursuit of truth intensified, with protesters assembling at airports nationwide, brandishing signs that proclaimed, "We fly with truth." Seats lacked color as celebrities donned shirts emblazoned with Zara's quote, "I'm not here to entertain your comfort." Activists and legal experts celebrated this moment as a pivotal shift not only for Nordsky, but for corporate America. Transparency was no longer a mere request, but a necessity. Marcus Ellison, once a reserved magnate, was now spearheading a corporate reckoning, akin to a general in battle. The morning following the public revelation of the federal investigation, the North Sky headquarters in New York resembled less a corporate fortress and more a battleground, with satellite vans lining the streets. Reporters gathered at the front gate, while shareholders anxiously walked the sidewalk, glued to their phones as they witnessed billions vanish in real time. Inside the boardroom, silence reigned, not due to a lack of decisions, but because no one was willing to break the tension. At 8:32 a.m. sharp, Marcus Ellison arrived, accompanied by his legal chief and ethics counsel, holding a binder that would prove to be the most significant document in the company's 32-year history. He did not sit down or exchange pleasantries. He simply set the binder down. The document was laid open to a highlighted page, and names began to be recited. The first 5 were recognizable: department heads, executives, and VPs who had either directly sanctioned misconduct or facilitated the subsequent cover-ups. Effective immediately, Victor stated without glancing up, you are terminated for cause. Your badges are deactivated, your stock privileges are frozen, and your legal representation will be managed by external counsel, not company-paid attorneys. The atmosphere in the room shifted from silence to panic. One executive attempted to voice an objection, but Victor raised a hand, halting him mid-sentence. You allowed a 16-year-old girl to be taken off a plane while you indulged in champagne on the upper floor, and then attempted to conceal it with policy memos and erased footage. His tone remained steady. It was unnecessary to raise it. This company will not be buried alongside it. Within 2 hours, security teams escorted 12 additional senior personnel from their offices, some in disbelief, others in quiet acceptance. IT teams locked their accounts, froze their communications, and flagged internal devices for investigation. By noon, the press had gathered names, photos, and a timeline. By 2 p.m., the company's stock had dropped by 48%, erasing over $4 billion in valuation and causing ripples throughout the international aviation market. Banks started retracting preferred lending rates, foreign partners withdrew codeshare agreements, and a notable investor from the UAE issued a statement condemning North Sky's ethical failures while announcing immediate divestment. Several private equity groups that had previously considered North Sky for global expansion deals now publicly distanced themselves from the brand. The repercussions extended beyond financial losses. They were deeply damaging to the brand's reputation, creating an irreversible impact. Each market Zara had been unable to enter now represented a burden too significant to overlook. In reaction, Nordsky initiated its crisis management plan, but Victor took a different approach. He halted all marketing spending and instructed that every planned advertisement be substituted with a stark black screen displaying a simple message: "We failed. Now we fix." He also directed the finance team to redirect executive bonus funds into a restitution fund for those affected in the past. Discrimination within the company prompted an unprecedented action from the CEO, who publicly invited former employees to submit claims and testimonies for investigation, extending whistleblower protection even to those bound by NDAs. This bold move shocked the industry. However, Victor's efforts didn't stop there. In a private summit with the Department of Transportation, the FAA, and civil rights watchdogs, he introduced a comprehensive reform framework aimed at establishing new standards throughout the aviation sector, including mandatory bias training. The proposal was not only aimed at flight crews, but also targeted corporate personnel, advocating for third-party audits of passenger incident logs and a federally maintained registry for discrimination claims against commercial airlines. This ambitious plan garnered both praise and doubt, yet its purpose was undeniable. In the meantime, those dismissed from Nordsky sought to preserve whatever fragments of their reputations they could. Gregory Holt, the ousted head of security, participated in a brief interview where he asserted that he was merely following orders and pointed fingers at an unnamed culture of corporations were apprehensive, as the internet rejected the narrative. Social media platforms circulated his leaked remarks incessantly. No one would regard her with any seriousness. Demonstrators gathered outside his secured residence, Book deals evaporated, and speaking engagements were rescinded. The individual who once considered himself invulnerable now found it impossible to enter a grocery store without attracting stares. Vanessa Reed, the flight attendant who confined Zara in the galley, faced formal misconduct allegations from the aviation union, resulting in her license being suspended pending an investigation. She provided a written statement. The apology was quickly scrutinized by critics as being performative and lacking substance. A class action lawsuit highlighting her actions and the systemic culture they represented has now identified her as a key example of frontline racial profiling in commercial aviation. Within 72 hours, those who once held power at North Sky were relegated to mere footnotes in a company-wide reckoning. However, Zara refrained from celebrating. She did not share triumphant messages or boast. Instead, she engaged with attorneys, policy advisors, and advocacy groups. Leaders are tasked with creating a restorative strategy not only for North Ski, but for the entire industry. She convened a private meeting with North Sky's remaining leadership, not to assign blame, but to foster renewal. "This isn't a revenge tour," she stated softly. "It's a reset." Some attendees avoided her gaze while others nodded gravely. Though her tone was devoid of anger, her words resonated powerfully. "You didn't lose $4 billion because of me. You lost it due to everything you chose to overlook prior to my arrival." As weeks went by, the media frenzy slowly diminished, giving way to a consistent focus on reform and restructuring. Norski, once characterized by polished marketing and emotional distance, had transformed into something more authentic and relatable. The airline's public image didn't bounce back immediately, nor did Victor or Zara anticipate it would. They weren't looking for accolades, they aimed for restoration. What started as a moment of disgrace on a flight to Los Angeles evolved into the most significant introspection in the company's history. As the chaos finally began to subside, an unforeseen transformation began, not with stock prices or news reports, but within the hearts of those who had previously found themselves on the opposing side. The first to step back into the light was Vanessa Reed. After enduring suspension and a union investigation, she vanished from public view. Few were aware that she had gone back to her hometown in Indiana, where her parents resided in a tranquil neighborhood outside Bloomington. For the initial weeks, she declined to take calls, erased old social media posts, and remained indoors. Yet something about the silence started to gnaw at her as she viewed the complete footage for the first time, unfiltered and unedited. She saw herself through an unvarnished lens, stripped of excuses and corporate training, revealing her raw behavior in its most unflattering light. For 2 hours, she wept. Then she picked up the phone and dialed the ethics line established by NSKI. "I want to be part of the training program," she stated. "Not to teach, God knows, but to learn, and if you'll allow me, to apologize." Months later, she returned to Nordsky, not as flight staff, but as a peer mentor in their new restorative conduct initiative. She began each session with a powerful statement. "I nearly ruined a life because I was too proud to challenge my own assumptions." Meanwhile, Gregory Holt, once the arrogant head of global security, now resided in a much smaller home 2 hours north of Atlanta. After several public attempts to restore his reputation failed and his name was removed from every alumni and industry page he had once proudly displayed, he sought therapy for the first time. In that moment, he realized that what he had long perceived as strength, his arrogance, his bluntness, his need for control, was in fact rooted in fear. Fear of seeming weak, fear of being wrong, fear of losing power. After spending 6 months in silence, he was encouraged by his daughter, who had not spoken to him since the scandal, to volunteer with a nonprofit focused on at-risk youth. He now leads workshops on accountability, beginning each session with the same statement. "My legacy used to be built on instilling fear in others. Now I build it by encouraging them to embrace their true selves." Others joined in, including Ronald Baxter, the aging flight coordinator who had once claimed that no black girl could afford first class. He was discovered working at a small local airport in Nevada, loading bags and refueling planes, not as a form of punishment, but by choice. He had retired early, sold his condo in Chicago, and discreetly penned personal apology letters to every former colleague he had ever disrespected. One of those colleagues shared the letter online, and while it didn't go viral, it resonated with thousands. In that letter, he stated, "I don't seek forgiveness, but I strive to improve each day." Even the anonymous technicians who carried out the deletion orders, those who adhered to commands without questioning, took their own form of responsibility. A group of 4 engineers collectively resigned and used their severance to finance an open-source project designed to develop digital transparency tools for whistleblowers. They named it Flare Flight Log Access and Reporting Engine, a subtle reference to the fire that revealed their actions. Complicity, yet the transformation was not limited to those directly involved. It reached those who had previously turned a blind eye. A young flight attendant named Emily Harper, who had been serving in economy class on Zara's notorious flight, confessed during a staff town hall that she witnessed the moment the bag was thrown and felt the injustice deep within her. However, she remained silent, convincing herself that it wasn't her place to intervene and that she couldn't affect any change. Yet she realized that silence does not shield the innocent. It merely safeguards the system that harms them. She was eventually promoted, not for her actions at that moment, completed, yet for what she was currently engaged in, setting a standard for others. On the 4th floor of the Norsky Tower, in a sunlit office with a view of the skyline, Zara sat by herself, crafting a new mission statement for the ethics division she now guided. She read each line aloud before finalizing it for print. Justice isn't merely about punishment, it's about transformation. And no one is beyond transformation as long as they are willing to confront their past and decide who they will become. She did not subscribe to the idea of erasing individuals. Rather, she believed in uplifting them. Then when they deserved it, by the time the 1-year anniversary of the incident came around, the airline had transformed in ways that seemed unimaginable. First-class passengers were no longer mere names on a list. They were individuals treated with unwavering respect. The company conducted an annual public ethics audit, organized equity summits in collaboration with civil rights groups, and perhaps most notably, rebranded its flagship diversity initiative as the Zara Standard. Marcus Ellison did not participate in the unveiling ceremony. Instead, he observed it from afar. From a distance, he stood proud, calm, and at peace, having taken every risk, pulled every lever, and dismantled every obstacle to uphold the dignity of one individual. In doing so, he transformed the dignity of countless others. At the heart of this narrative was a girl who had once been told she didn't belong in her seat. Now she determined where the seats were arranged. If this story resonated with you or shifted your perspective on justice and accountability, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss what's next. Which part of Zara's journey impacted you the most, and if you were in her shoes? Her seat. What would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know your location. Your opinion is important to us. Zara's experience on Flight 227 reveals profound lessons about dignity, resilience, and accountability. The core takeaway is that no one should be judged or mistreated based on appearance or assumptions. Zara's composure under pressure teaches us to maintain self-respect in the face of injustice, a principle vital in today's diverse America, where biases persist in public spaces like workplaces or schools. Her story also underscores the power of speaking truth to power. By leveraging evidence and her voice, Zara transformed a personal wrong into systemic change, reflecting the American value of justice through action. This resonates in 2025 as social media amplifies calls for corporate accountability, from discriminatory practices to environmental negligence. To apply this, we must challenge stereotypes daily, whether confronting microaggressions or advocating for fairness in our communities. Like Zara, we can use technology, like recording incidents or sharing stories online, to hold institutions accountable. Her journey inspires us to stand firm, demand respect, and drive change, ensuring everyone has a seat at the table, regardless of background.